should probably tell you now before it's way too late.
Welcome all of you. Thank you so much for coming to hear this talk. And particularly because although we're hearing a lot about food addiction now in the press, you know, I really think we're at a tipping point. I'm not sure if we're actually talking about food addiction. So you're going to get the real stuff here, as far as I'm concerned. So I got into this field from a personal point of view, as Mike already mentioned, and you saw my picture earlier. I'm like many of us who get into this field. We have our own stories, and I tripped upon the idea, the realization that if I didn't have a little bit, it was a lot easier to have nothing than a little bit of something. And it wasn't until I got into addiction medicine that I thought, oh my God, that I've been preaching this all the time when I talk about alcohol, cocaine, et cetera, et cetera. So why don't I see this as the same thing? This is an addiction. And I did that, and it worked, and it was great. But then I went out into the community, and people would just be so dismissive and say, don't be silly, Vera, that's not an addiction. How can you be addicted to food? And then I would keep going, you're right, I should have my cheat days, I should have my little bits of here and there on birthdays, weddings, anniversaries, but then I would get back and gain weight again. And then it wasn't until I found some actual literature. My mentor, my person that I love is Dr. Nora Volkov, and in 2008 she's actually the head of the American Society of Addiction Medicine. Sort of co-authored a journal about food addiction from a medical point of view, and I thought, there, now I've got it. One of the things that I've learned is if you're on the path to recovery, this is one of the things that Tony, you're talking about too, the way to stay on the path of recovery is to be in the company of people on the path to recovery and to talk about it and to teach about it. And so that's been my means of staying in recovery, is to talk about this. So now I talk about it from a personal point of view and a professional point of view. And particularly now, as people are interested, and I'm hearing about other people talking about food addiction, but they're not really talking about it, I'm thinking, now let's get the message out there, at least from this point of view.
Yeah, and just final tidbit of reflection, and we'll move into the book. I mean, 2016, looking back, was actually a great year in terms of progressing in terms of sugar awareness. There was a lot of information that came out, primarily talking about how fat was vilified and sugar, carbohydrates kind of took a back seat.
Yeah.
So yes, we're definitely making progress, and I thank you for everything that you do. So getting into the book, in the first chapter, you were basically laying down the groundwork for the reader, us, a better understanding of food addiction. I just want to share a short paragraph from the book. I'll read it out. Eventually, I found a solution that tamed this creature inside. I had to stop eating my favorite foods, the ones that provided me the immediate relief. The donuts, the croissants, the cannolis, the ice creams, just stop. Whenever I lapsed and I tried to revert to what I thought as a common sense notion, that I just needed to learn how to eat properly, I soon slipped back to the same obsessive unmanageability. Mm-hmm. Now, I have to tell you, I've read your book a few times, and I've listened to the audio version also, but I still, even as I was preparing for this, can vividly recall the very first time I came across this. In particular, the word creature. I'm going to ask you to describe, whether it's through your own personal experiences and or your clinical experience, why in the world would you use the word creature to describe this inner being?
Okay, so, you know, one of the things that I'm hoping to flesh out today and in further talks is that I think all of the food, the food, especially the processed food environment that's out there, is addictive and it's a toxic food environment that we live in, and that every single one of us, whether we're a food addict or not, are compelled to eat this food because it's engineered to make us, if we're human beings, eat. But how many of us are actually food addicts? I don't think everybody in this room is. But I'm a food addict, and one of the things that I discovered when I tried to pick up and eat a little bit again is that this is what in the field of addiction, we have terminology that we use, and one of the terms we use is a phenomena of craving. And I would have no craving, try something, because it wouldn't be that I had a craving, oh, that looks good, I'll have a taste of that, but then suddenly I wanted more of that. And what I discovered is that suddenly I wanted more, especially if I had gave in, it was like scratching an itch. The itch got worse. And this particular time when I thought about this, I was in my university years, and I had stopped drinking alcohol, stopped doing a whole bunch of stuff because I wanted to do well at school. And I was shocked at how I wanted the sugar once I started it. And it felt like there was an animal, a beast inside of me. And now when I'm in the addiction field and I hear people talking about, why do they do the crazy things they do, they'll frequently say, I mean, why would a crack user, they say, Vera, I hate this stuff, but I still want it. I don't want to be doing this, but I still have to do it. And they will often talk about it as a third party, as a thing that's inside of them. And for me, it felt like a creature that was like just running the show. And I think that one of the definitions of addiction is when this urge, well, maybe I'll have a little bit of this, becomes bigger and bigger and bigger to the point where it actually runs my day. And what's the difference between somebody who just wants a little versus that's addiction there. This is not yet addiction, maybe never, but sometimes we move into this category.
Yeah. First of all, I think you totally nailed it with the word creature. Maybe to touch upon just something you just mentioned, and you get into it in the book, that wanting more, the itch that you talked about.
Yeah.
The analogy used in the book frequently is the kindling, right? You have that just, it seems like an innocent little smoldering fire, but just the slightest bit of fuel. So whether it's added sugars or refined wheat, for some of us, it just turns into a blaze in the creature.
And there's a scientific basis to that, which is what we'll get to.
I'm going to touch upon this and we'll move into the next topic. My main takeaway from the book, and it just tapping onto the creature, first of all, that this creature exists. That was one thing that I wasn't alone, because I felt like, well, maybe there's something wrong with me. So that was one takeaway. But more importantly is this creature, as bombastic as this creature may seem, it's very tameable. It's tameable if we apply the same principles of fundamental addiction. If we apply them here, in this, the creature's tamed. The creature does not die, but I just want him or her or it or whatever it is to just lay as low as possible. That was my takeaway from the book. I'm going to move into, so we're going to get into some of the theory now. The energy crash. You got the adorable little cat there. Yeah, I'll just share a paragraph from the book, and then I'm going to get you to elaborate. When we indulge in a high sugar treat like a can of soda, a bag of candy, a muffin, our insulin spikes to a higher than normal level to transport the excess sugar from the bloodstream to the brain and the fat cells. An hour later, after the sugar has been transported away, the spike of insulin abates. But after that unnatural burst of energy from excessive sugar, we experience an energy crash. As the sugar is whisked away into the cells, our system plummets. The result, agitation, ravenous hunger, and extreme anxiety. So my question to you is, how is it that an unnatural burst of energy can affect our moods, whether it's anxiety, agitation, or even cause extreme hunger?
Okay, so what we're talking about there is quite simply the hypoglycemic episode. And it can be the trigger for a food addict's binge cycle, or it might just be a hypoglycemic episode. But when we talked about the creature, and I'm suggesting that I'm using that word, it's a metaphor, it's something that people can relate to, but there's an actual scientific base to this. It's a phenomena that's happening in the brain where my willpower has no power, has no will. And what's happening is that this drive to eat, and in this case, not quite that drive to eat, but that drive to to eat, is linked to a survival instinct. It's a part of our brain, a more primitive part of our brain, where although willpower may have some role, it always takes a back step to, if there's something in my face that is threatening my life, I have to save my life first. I don't care how pretty it's going to look. So even before we get to the addiction piece, because that hooks into that survival instinct, we just have the simple hormonal piece. What happens when you eat sugar is you get a burst of sugar, and then insulin, which the pancreas creates is there to carry the insulin, pardon me, the sugar to the brain and to the cells. And if there is, we have a finely calibrated system of hormones, and we can probably handle, if we're not food addicts, the equivalent to the sugar of an apple or two a day, or a glass of wine a day, or maybe one piece of chocolate a day. Maybe, if we're not food addicts, or 2 pieces. I'm talking pieces, not bars. And so our insulin will match the sugar load. But if you take a burst of insulin, or pardon me, a burst of sugar, something that is overwhelmed, that's more than a natural, like an apple or 2 a day, with all the fiber and the skin and everything like that, you will overwhelm that system. The body, the pancreas will pump up the insulin and try to mop up the sugar, but it most likely will take up too much sugar, and so what you end up happening is an hour or 2 later, a crash of sugar. And what is sugar but fuel for the brain? And when the fuel is starting to run out, what happens? Survival is kicking in. Something's wrong. If I don't have enough sugar, I will die. That's true. We will. And so you start to get that agitation, that anxiety, craving for more sugar. This is just biological sense. It's not something wrong with you. It's you are responding to this load that we have normalized to say is normal. A chocolate bar is normal. No, it's not normal. Not for our body. But we believe it is. So anyway, we put in this load, and then you get this phenomena because we know that finely tuned system is getting overwhelmed.
Yeah, and we're in the next slide. We're going to get more into the leptin and insulin. But basically, I mean, for a food addict, this just becomes a never-ending cycle.
Right.
And to bring it back to the energy crash or sugar crash, I mean, it's basically a hangover.
Yeah. Well, yes. It's a response, and then yes, it's a hangover when it starts to become a pattern. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, let's move into insulin and leptin. So in your book, you indicate scientists have discovered that the more a person weighs, the more likely he or she will not only become insulin resistant, but leptin resistant. So if you could just elaborate a little bit more on insulin and leptin resistance, and we do have a few slides for you.
Okay, so I mean, this is quite a complicated area, and I actually like to spend a bit more time talking about it, so I'll try to just précis it and shorten it here. But I've just mentioned to you a little bit about the insulin piece. So, I mean, insulin is an essential hormone that deals with sugar when we put it into our body. Again, I want to introduce this idea of a finely calibrated system that we work really well with if we have only so much sugar. And I'm not talking about the foods that we're eating today. I'm talking about what we should have been eating like 100, 200 years ago, that kind of food. That works great. If you are eating in an environment where there is a constant overload, one of the things that happens is you get insulin resistance. I mean, eventually the body starts to wear and tear. I mean, it's a bit like somebody who's running. The knees eventually start to wear and tear. We get arthritis. You could almost see type 2 diabetes as a kind of arthritis in the sense of it's a wear and tear of the system. It's actually not a shortage of insulin. It's a shortage of, or an inability of the body to respond to the constant onslaught of this excessive load of sugar and insulin, which then starts to get flabby and irresponsive. So we take meds to help it. So that's the insulin piece. We essentially become type 2 diabetes is called insulin resistance. Okay, so then we have leptin resistance, which is a fairly new area of discussion. I'd say it's maybe 5 years old now, where, I mean, what is leptin? It's another hormone that, it's the hormone that satiates you. It's the hormone that makes you feel full after 20 minutes. It's the reason why your mom would say as a child, don't eat so fast, eat over 20 minutes and then you'll be full. It's the reason why if you gulp everything down, 20 minutes later you go, oh my God, I can't believe I ate so much. That's leptin finally kicking in. And that's a great hormone, and it works perfectly in a normal environment. In an abnormal environment, you may still want more, even though you're full, and you feel full. You still want more. A food addict or somebody who overeats will know, I eat and I'm not even full. I mean, I'm not even hungry. Or I don't even know what hunger feels like anymore, and I don't even know what feeling full feels like natural. So That's leptin. When you have an excess of leptin, leptin is released from the stomach when the stomach is full. It's also contained in the fat cells, presumably because if you've got an extra amount of fat, which we actually want to have, believe it or not, the best way to be is not a perfect weight, but about 10 or 20 pounds more, just in case. You think about, the hunting-gathering society. It's feast, famine. When there's a famine, you want to have a bit of extra weight. That was what the initial idea was. So leptin would be there to say, okay, you've reached the maximum that you need. Now you don't want to eat as much anymore. However, if you are obese, you have extra leptin, and we become leptin resistant. And if you become leptin resistant, that means you have leptin, but the leptin receptors are getting, I want to say, not useful. Let me just finish this thought. They become ineffective. And so then, not only are your fat cells unable to say stop, you don't need any more, but you're not full. So what ends up happening that we discover is that the more obese a person becomes, the more leptin resistant they become, the less satisfied with food they become, the more they want to eat. And so you get this momentum of a person who's not getting the energy or the satisfaction, but the craving to eat is even bigger. This is not even, we haven't even touched addiction yet. We've just talked about the hormones.
Yeah, perhaps this is an oversimplification, and if it is, feel free to tell me. But I mean, leptin, it's acting as a satiation sensor. I mean, so I relate it to, when you're filling your car with gasoline. As the fuel tank gets close to full, you get a little trigger, a little mechanism that goes click to tell you, hey, it's full, ease up on the gas. Because if that sensor wasn't there, you'd keep filling until it would overflow. So that's basically what leptin is doing. And then if I look at the pancreas, I look back to my mechanical days, the pancreas is acting as a pump. And its job is to secrete insulin. And just like a mechanical pump, if you overwork it, eventually it will get to the point where it's not functioning correctly, or it will seize altogether.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah,
That's
okay,
a great
there you
explanation.
go. That's what happens when you read the book.
Perfect. Perfect. I like that. I like that a lot.
That's the stuff that you get here at MODA.
And this is just the hormonal piece. We haven't even touched the addiction piece.
Great. And just on the same topic too, in terms of what to do about it, you get into great detail in the book in terms of getting leptin and insulin to get back to where they want to be. And quite simply, and again, it's a simplification, but let's get off processed food. Right, the body just starts to naturally go back to its manufacturer's default settings.
Can I just say something
sure,
about that? Let's just get back to processed food. This talk here, I mean, the way we're talking, it sounds like we could be selling a product. Like, hey, you're going to lose weight, you're going to sustain weight loss, and buy this product. What we're asking you to buy is a concept that's free. It is basically don't eat processed foods.
We have an acronym around here. I'm going to ask the group. It's JERF, and as a group, let's eat real food. That's what we do 3 times a day.
Exactly. Exactly.
Actually, might be more than that because there's
no contraption or drug to sell here.
It actually is. It's quite simple, and I think one of the reasons that the message doesn't take off is because it is too simple and it's not billable. Like there's no money to be made really on JERF, right? There isn't. Okay, we'll move on from this and. In Chapter 4, there's a term that you use. Okay, let's get away from this. The term is chasing the dragon. Chasing the dragon. Can you elaborate what that means?
Okay, so now we're starting to get into the addiction world. And here's where I really would like people, even if you're not a food addict, in other words, the drive to eat will actually dominate other things that you want to do in your life. You can still find some of the concepts and tools of addiction, the addiction service area useful. And chasing the dragon is one of them. The concept of that was probably initially, a heroin user had their first fix and was like, oh my God, it was so wonderful. And then, wanted to keep using. But every time after that, and I hear people say this all the time, they could never get that first experience. They could never get it. But that first experience was so powerful that it kept driving them. It was like that memory, we call it the euphoric recall of the first time, that even when you never quite get it, the drive to try to get it is so strong that you could just keep picking up. And part of the reason that that happens is because there is a tolerance. The body, the brain, loves new, but then it doesn't. It only loves new to a point. And almost before we know it, I mean, it might actually look like 2 or 3 weeks of taking a pill, where now you need not 1 but 2 to get the same effect. Not 2 but 3 to get the same effect. We call that dependence and tolerance. It actually starts to happen right from the get-go, but you just don't see it until maybe a couple of weeks later. So probably the best way that you might recognize what I'm talking about is if you go to a vacation like Cuba and go, wow, this is great. I'm going to, those timeshares are right there as you walk in. I'm going to sign up. And then, you sign up, and then a week later it's like, oh, I'm bored. Oh, I don't know if I should have got that timeshare, because you're already done. You're done with it. You want to go back home, and that's the end of it. The new has become old. And the brain likes that, but it tries immediately to make it the new normal. Basically, the new becomes the
the new normal.
yeah,
so
exactly.
maybe to kind of bring it in terms of food sense,
yes.
in terms of tolerance, I think the best example would be, if you've always been accustomed to a regular coffee, so 1 milk, 1 sugar. If you start going double, so 2 creams, 2 sugar, eventually the double is your new normal. You get used to it.
Exactly.
Now the food industry, they've figured this out. They've figured it out a long time ago, and they've slowly been increasing portions and manipulating the food to just keep building our tolerance. Because quite frankly,
Right.
I can't help but think, if we were to take a typical confection from today, put it in a time machine, and take it to, I don't know, even 1940, 1950, 1960, they would find it unpalatable. Because what
I
we're
know.
eating
Remember those little Coke bottles?
We actually did that the other day.
Yeah. It would be nothing now.
Yep,
It's just a sip.
The original Coca-Cola was was about 280 milliliters, and now we're talking about in a workshop the other day, it's actually 1.25 liters as they're passing off as a single as a single serving.
Yeah.
Almost 5 times.
And the younger you get, this is where we talk about addiction again, how it's useful. The younger you get to being introduced to that first experience, essentially the dragon that you're now trying to chase, the harder it is to get that out of your head. That's why we don't want young kids, like 19-year-olds smoking. Well, personally, I'm going to give you my bias here. I'm not happy about this medical marijuana thing. The younger you get somebody smoking pot, the more likely they are going to be introduced to a dragon. So they may, it may be, whatever it is, they're going to be stuck with some kind of an addiction. And what are we doing with our kids? We're giving them cereals at such a young age. I mean, so I mean, they're being introduced to the dragon right from the get-go.
Yeah, what we're doing, I posted something on Facebook yesterday. It's what I refer to as the food industry is creating a proprietary palate. And this is kind of economics 101, is if you get somebody hooked on something, whether it's a good or a service, or in this case food, you now have a customer for life.
Right.
And by that's why when I'm working with families, I encourage you to eat outside the box. I mean, when you're eating a lot of these processed foods, the example I'll give you is something like the fruit roll-up bars. If somebody, whether it's an adult or a child, is frequently eating an apple roll-up bar, their taste buds get accustomed to that. And then a regular apple is not palatable anymore, any taste.
Right.
So hence, you've now created a customer for life.
Right, and the thing about that is, here again is an addiction sort of appreciation. This normal calibration that I was talking about with the hormones, of 1 or 2 apples a day for insulin and leptin, we can also see that in the addiction paradigm. And when we're looking at addiction and desire, we're talking about not leptin and insulin, but dopamine. And at a normal apple or 2 a day, or like not a roll up, but the other, an apple is tasty, it's delicious. A banana is like, oh my God, that's great. But then when you take a fruit roll up, you have gone beyond that. Again, it's this burst of something which creates a dragon, because we remember the big. We remember the extraordinary. And when you have an extraordinary, it's imprinted in your brain. Now the fruit roll-up is going to become the new mark that you want something to match.
Absolutely. And
This is how the brain works. And that's the problem with addiction.
Yeah, and that kind of takes us to the next point. I mean, sugar versus other addictions. I've frequently heard people say, and you've had been working in the field of addictions, obviously more than I have, but people actually say, I remember hearing it for the first time, sugar is actually it's harder to get off than even some of the drugs like heroin or even crystal meth. And I mean, this does a bit of a comedic look at this, but it is harder to get off sugar than other drugs.
I see this happening all the time at Renaissance. So Renaissance is a treatment center for drugs and alcohol, and I can't tell you how many. I mean, I do it as a joke when I do classes with the guys. I'll say to them, how many of you will eat 2 or 3 chocolate bars a day? Now, if you could, and I'd say at least half of the people will put up their hand. And then I'll ask, and is this always been the case? And they'll go, no, I never used to eat like this before. And what they find is that they put down their drugs, they put down their alcohol. We've set the dragon. And, addiction, it doesn't really matter what the drug is. Out there, it depends on what's happening in here. That dopamine surge is the dragon. I guess dopamine is the dragon. And when you put it down, now you want that high somehow, and one little roll-up is not enough. It's certainly not going to match cocaine. You're going to have a big bag of roll-ups. And I've seen people do very well. A heroin addict who was a guy on the street injecting to the point of loss of home, doing very well on 2 tubs of Haagen-Dazs at night. Great. And they got off their heroin, yes, and then they died 8 years later of a heart attack. Basically, they're facing in a Haagen-Dazs. And in the time period until then, because I saw this person on a regular basis, he said, I'm doing well. I have no cravings for heroin. I can't believe it. No cravings. No, you didn't, because you were doing something else instead. And in the book, I talk about a crystal meth guy. And this was actually news to me, because crystal meth, in my experience, is one of the nastiest quickly addictive drugs. I actually don't think it's the most deadly. I think that the fentanyl crisis right now is the most deadly. But crystal meth is the one that it's like a match. You're just gone. And he said, I got off of that. Religion and sugar. And then he finally got off of the sugar, and it took him a long time, and a lot more religion.
Okay,
a lot more religion.
And that's typically referred to as transfer addiction, or
that's transfer addiction. And he's also a real estate agent, and so I think there's a little bit of a high there too, right? Selling your houses.
All right. Well, okay. So we'll move into the question: am I a food addict? Inside, you either got a brochure or a handout out front when you first came in. Are you a food addict? It's a little one-pager. So these are 10 things. These are 10 that are in your book. It's chapter 5. It's actually 10 of 20 from Food Addicts in Recovery Anonymous. I'd encourage you on your own time, if it's something that you feel you want to know more about, or am I a food addict? You go through this list. There's 10 of them. It's the predominant 10.
Go through a few of them.
Sure.
Yeah, let me just go through a few of them. This list is essentially, in a way, trying to show how much is our natural desire to eat sweet, because we're all wired to want energy-dense foods, whether it's fat or sugar or a combo. So that doesn't mean you're a food addict if you like those things. Has it gone into a level where it's kind of really messed up your life? So have you ever gone to a point where you've wanted to stop, but you couldn't? You want to. I'm full. I've got diabetes, I've got whatever, but you can't. Do you find that you think about food or your weight all the time? I'm talking about, like, even instead of doing other things that you should be doing in your life. Have you tried to do one diet after another, and constantly no success? Or yes, no, that whole yo-yo thing. Binging, eating, trying to get rid of it. I mean, this is not normal behavior. Do you eat differently in private than in public, because you're too embarrassed about how you eat in private? One of the things about addiction is people become very secretive, very alone, because they are themselves aghast at what is the monster. Anyway, okay. Do you eat large quantities of food at one time, or do you restrict, like totally nothing? One of the things that's the hardest in the food addiction program that we did at Renaissance, I discovered with a lot of people is when they were eating, we introduced a natural, like 2,000 calorie a day food plan. And people would say, well, wait a minute, that's too much food. And in some cases, it felt like too much food because their stomach was so used to processed food. But in a lot of cases, it was like, if they're not binging, they should be on a diet and restricting. And so to eat normally felt like too much. So, okay. Do you hide your food to make sure you have enough so you don't have to share it with somebody else? Have you ever stolen other people's food because you don't have enough? And I don't mean because you're hungry, because you like that particular thing that they bought. Have you ever discarded food only to dig it out of the garbage and get it again? And we see that with a lot of addiction. People will, throw away their drug, and then later that night, they're looking for it. And have you ever felt hopeless?
My question is, so 8 years ago, I would have crossed off 7 or 8 of those things. Now, I consider myself a recovering food addict. It would be 1 or less. So does that mean I'm cured?
I would say that would mean that your condition is what's the word? What's the word for cancer? In remission. Yeah, it's in remission because you're not reintroducing. It's like you mentioned. What did you say? You said like the flame.
So it's a little campfire.
It's smoldering.
Yeah. Or the other, the one-liner I remember, and I think I heard it from you, or it's used in the world of addiction. I mean, once you become a pickle, you can never become a cucumber again.
Yeah.
I love the one-liners.
Yeah. The smoldering thing, if I can just go with that for a second. The smoldering thing, like I haven't had sugar for much longer than 10 years. It's probably 15 years, something like that. And I know that if I were to see something that was particularly tasty that I used to like, I know if my eyes linger on that too long, it's just smoldering. It's not like I'm immune to that. I've learned through recovery tools, out of sight, out of mind. If that is there, I don't look at it. It's like at the Starbucks line. I make a point when I'm standing in the Starbucks line to not look for too long. I see it there only enough to go, don't look there anymore. I have learned not to go down to the Bathurst subway because of that Cinnabon. I have learned to ask my partner, don't make toast, because toast is got a smell that I like. So, I mean, those are all recovery tools. So it's smoldering, because if I were to, even the smell, it would start to flare up again.
Actually, a little bit on cues, but before I do, we have another
cues.
one-liner. We have another one-liner here. Keep your eyes on your own plate. Right? Actually, I stole that from Kate. You know what I'm talking about. But on the cues, the Cinnabon resonates. Thankfully, they took it out of Union Station. Although I don't know now that they're going through the revamp. I don't know if they're going to bring it in. But yeah, I had to when I was cutting through Union Station. I said no, I'm not going through there. But what interested me is when I started getting into was the book Salt, Sugar, Fat by Michael Moss. But what amazed me was the extent that the food industry goes through for packaging. How just a visual cue, and there's a certain brand of cookies from a food chain that I won't mention, that just the mere sight of it, when I was first losing weight in the early stages, every time I saw it, like it's always at the end of the aisle, which is part of their thing, and I had to stop shopping at that chain because if I just the visual cue. And I later learned, so Howard Moskowitz, who was basically the guy, a lot of the documentation of Howard Michael Moss, the engineering that they went through to engineer just the products to make it. It's almost like you're tasting it, just looking at it.
Yeah.
So the cues, so smell but even the sight.
Yeah, and just again, I want to make an analogy here. This is no different. So somebody might say you wouldn't even go to Loblaws or whatever because they have this. I would like to suggest if we use the idea of addiction, we start to respect some of these things. You say, that's nuts. You can't go to Loblaws. Come on, it's everywhere. Because we ask people, if you are a cocaine user, you may have to leave your neighborhood. You may have to leave your husband or your wife. You may have to leave your we call it people, places, and things in order to stay sober. Are you willing to do that to stay sober? Well, eventually the person, if they want to get sober, will say yes. And similarly, you may have to not go to Loblaws again,
Yep.
or in my case, Harvard Bakery, that
Yeah,
kind of thing.
okay.
Bathurst
Yeah.
Subway.
So that's the thing. Once you realize your triggers, and at the time I
Right.
didn't even realize what was happening until I understood later.
Yeah.
But again, the enormity that the food industry goes through to make things to sell their products. But I can't see the clock, but I have a feeling it's 1:45. Just trying to manage time. Okay, because the next two slides are going to take a fair amount of time. So in your book, you describe three problems: the normal eater, the emotional eater, and the
Okay.
food addict. And as best as you can, if you can take us through
Okay.
those three.
Yeah. So when I was saying earlier with the hormonal piece, that normal eater can still eat too much, and I would say maybe if we had to give a percentage in the population, I'd say probably 60%. And I'm being conservative. I'm not sure what I'm being, but okay. So because we are living in an environment where the food industry is engineering us to overeat, and so anybody will, if they have a few chips, will want to finish the bag or to have a few more than they expected. That and everybody laughs about that. It's normal. It is normal, and a lot of the piece about the hormonal piece that I actually would like to do a little bit more at some point is that, as I said earlier, if you are an obese person, your drive to eat and your lack of satisfaction with food will grow, even if you're a normal eater, just by virtue of your weight. And then, depending on where you live and the cultural and the familial patterns of eating and all that sort of thing will also put into place vehicles that will have you overeat. It doesn't mean that you're a food addict or anything like that. And if you address those things through counseling, through changing your environment, through education, a good dietary plan, you can get back to a normal weight and a normal desire to eat. And in as much as places like Weight Watchers and Jenny Craig and all those kind of programs work, they work for normal eaters, and they do work. And it's a bit like saying that not anyone who drinks 3 glasses of wine will feel tipsy. Not everybody who drinks 3 glasses of wine is an alcoholic and will want the rest of the bottle in somebody else's bottle. That's an alcoholic. So the person who might be drinking a bottle of wine a day and knows it's not good and needs to learn how to change their life so that they can get down to 3 or 4 glasses or 2 glasses or 1 glass, will go to a program that's a moderate drinking plan, like controlled drinking, and it will work because they are normal drinkers who have just kind of slipped up somewhere and they can kind of correct themselves, self-correct themselves. That would be akin to this, a normal eater, like Weight Watchers, controlled eating plan. That's a normal eater. Then we have emotional eating, and this is kind of a nod to the whole...
Sorry, I got this. Stress is it is.
Yeah.
Stress is dessert backwards.
Well, although that would actually fit with the normal eater as well. I mean, we talk about comfort eating, which a lot of people will say, yes, I eat to eat emotionally, to soothe the emotions. I'm not sure if we will get a chance to talk about the neurochemistry here, but food addresses a number of different neurochemicals. Dopamine is one of them, and endorphins and serotonin are the other two big ones. And these are neurochemicals that are neurochemicals not just of desire, but also of safety and of comfort and of easefulness. And I can take a drug to give me those things, Prozac. There was even a book a while ago, Potatoes Not Prozac. Yeah, that will give me, I can take a drug or I can take a food that will give me that. So a plate of pasta will make me sleepy and kind of like, I don't care. A tub of Haagen-Dazs will give me, that glazed out, numbed feeling that an endorphin will give me, which is the same as a Tylenol 3 or a glass of wine. So they actually will, there is a neurochemical comfort that does happen with food that, again, if you can manage to control that, you're just eating emotionally or normally, that you just need to self-correct if there's a problem. This next category of emotional eating more talks about, no, not to food addiction, the emotional eating, is more of a nod to the psychological conditions of anorexia, bulimia, binge eating disorder. That phenomena, which may look like food addiction, may not be food addiction. A person can be anorexic and restrict their food, have body dysmorphia where they don't even have a sense of what they look like. They don't have a sense of what hunger feels like or fullness feels like. Similarly with binge eating and bulimia, they're kind of like coping mechanisms because food is so powerful. They're coping mechanisms to deal with other issues, maybe trauma in the past, issues of control, sexual trauma. And if you address those issues, then the food, which was just a solution to those issues, will abate. You won't need to eat that in the same way that you may not need to take a drug. That's what that is. But food addiction is a third category. You could be one of the first two, or were one of the first two, and then also develop an addiction. In the same way that somebody who smokes a few cigarettes, once in a while, then when they try to go on a diet, end up smoking all the time, and now they're a smoker because of the access, the amount. So you can become an addict just through full access, even if you were one of the other two categories. But it's a separate piece. It's an actual biological change that's happened in the brain.
And there can be overlap between the three.
Yes, absolutely, there can be. And that makes it very muddy and very difficult to diagnose. And it's probably one of the main reasons why food addiction, this phenomena, this change, is not acknowledged by the medical establishment, because they say, but we got an explanation. It's the normal eating hormonal piece, or the person's a binge eater, or a bulimic. That's the explanation. And we have, big artifices of medical bureaucracies for both of those. The obesity clinics in the first, the psychological clinics, the psychologists who do the eating disorders in the second. We don't need a third. That doesn't make sense because you can't be addicted to food. And so this is, if you say, well, if food addiction exists, why are we not medically acknowledging it? It's because there's a bit of a political battle, economic battle. We're just beginning, but it's been very difficult. Let me just finish this piece. The DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Psychiatrists, every number of years has conventions to discuss what the new diagnoses should be or what we should change. Like autism or Asperger's got ditched, and that sort of thing. Binge eating disorder was finally introduced as its own condition. Food addiction, the advocates said, please acknowledge us. And the sort of compendium of psychiatrists said, not yet, you don't have enough research to show me how you're different than binge eating, that contingent of people. So we're still at an early stage, and it's basically battling two establishments.
And so that's actually going to take us into the stages of food addiction, which we're going to do in a second.
Yep.
And after this slide, we'll get into the Q&A. So as an FYI, for the Q&A session, you can either just stand up and ask a question on a handheld mic. If you'd prefer, everyone should either have just a little piece of paper. You can write it down, and we'll just collect them. So if there's anything that's coming to mind for a question, jot it down, and we'll gather them up, and we'll certainly try to get to as many as possible. Okay, so we're talking about the emotional leader, the normal leader, the emotional leader, and the food addict, and you were talking about how there was overlap. And what's important to understand with addiction is there are stages of food addiction. There's actually one or two more than this. There's a pre-stage, but and feel free to talk about them. But early stage, mid stage, and late stage. If you can kind of maybe take us through.
Okay, so I didn't actually say very much about what food addiction was in comparison to the other two. So the thing about food addiction, which makes it its own, I mean, we call it a biological phenomena, and what's happened is that this surge of dopamine, this excess of, I mean, dopamine is our neurochemical that makes us curious and interested. You know, what's this person going to say next? That sort of thing. And when you get a surge of that, you can do that by behavior, like gambling. Am I going to win not $10, but $6 million? Wow, I really want to know. So that's a big surge. Or it can be through a chemical like sugar. So an apple or two a day is tasty. Fruit roll-ups or 6 or 10 is even more tasty. It's extra dopamine. What happens is the brain becomes tolerant. I don't want the apple anymore. I want the Fruit Loop. Now I need to have 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or whatever it is. What essentially happens is there's a neurological phenomena where there's this adaptation that happens, and then this chasing the dragon, this constant attempt to try to get to that normal, which wasn't normal once, but now it's the new normal. So that is a physiological, neurological phenomena that happens. That's what we're calling the addiction. When does that become an addiction is when that phenomena becomes so large that I am now, it's taken over my life. I'm more interested in this than I am in my work, my family, the baseball game that I'm supposed to go with the kids to see, the dog I'm supposed to walk. I'm more interested in this. And even if I'm not, I am. I can't help it. It's like an itch that you can't scratch, because you really can't. You can scratch it so much it'll become an ulcer. You still want to scratch it. I mean, that's what addiction is. It's levels of impairment. The stages are ways of kind of monitoring this. They're useful ways to explain. So an early stage might be a normal eater who has not yet become a food addict and may never become a food addict, but it might also be somebody who will, because they have a genetic predisposition to anything. If they smoke cigarettes, they're going to be the smoker. They're going to be the alcoholic. They're going to be the drug addict. Or you know, the pain pill person who's got back pain. Not everybody becomes an opiate addict, but some people do. So that's, and likewise for food. They're going to become the food addict. I don't know at an early stage who's who, but that early stage person usually recognizes later on, it was even when I was a kid, I was the one who would steal from my grandmother's cookies when nobody noticed, and my sister could wait until she was offered, or not have it at all. So early stage, like I said, you may not even notice, because everybody wants to eat when we're introduced to these foods. Middle stage is where usually where people are already starting to go on the diets. And they're already, you know, the yo-yo thing is starting to happen. They may have already sought some professional help. If not professional, then, you know, Weight Watchers or something like that. It's starting to get in the way. Basically, it's an awareness that control is not so strong. And why is it not so strong? Because our willpower is in a weaker part of the brain. It's a more newly evolved, but not as primitive and instinctual as my desire to survive. And the more addicted I become, the more I need this to survive. Willpower is always takes the back seat, because I want to survive. I don't need to look pretty. I don't need to be diplomatic. I just need to be alive. Willpower is secondary. So middle stage, we're starting to see some of that struggle. Late stage, I give up. I give up. I've already lost my housing. If I'm a crack addict, I've already lost my whatever. I'm just trying to stay alive, literally, and not feel bad, not go into withdrawal. You're not even using to feel happy anymore. You're using so that you don't feel unhappy in withdrawal, because the withdrawal, the worse it gets harder. So what we see with late stage food addicts, we don't even see them in the clinic anymore. They're the people who are so embarrassed about their behavior or the way they look, they don't even go out anymore. They don't go out to events anymore. Basically they can become shut-ins. Or they're the people who are going to clinics, the obesity clinics, and being told, I'm sorry, I can't help you.
And usually at the late stages when we see the most serious of the medical issues.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's right. And then the sad thing is, the last thing, and let me just end that, is that at least with the alcoholic, we'll say, you know, we may not say it on the death certificate for the family's sake that they died of their alcoholism, but everybody knows they died of their alcoholism. They died of their crack addiction. They died of cigarette smoking. Lung cancer, we call it lung cancer, but you know, usually people know it's because they smoked. We're still not calling it food addiction. We're calling it diabetes. We're calling it heart attack. We're calling it
hypertension.
hypertension. We're calling it a stroke. We should be calling it a food addiction. You can see I'm getting passionate here because it's becoming a political issue, I think.
The metabolic syndrome.
Until we call it what it is, we're not going to be able to treat this properly.
Well, for the longest time, the metabolic syndrome had 4, and
Metabolic
now
syndrome.
now it's more of 8.
Right.
I'm trying to diabetes, hypertension. I forget the first 4. Now it's 8. Cancers. Alzheimer's, fatty liver disease. So there are 8 things in there.
Right. And we should be calling metabolic syndrome food addiction.
Yeah.
Or sugar addiction anyway, because it's basically sugar that's causing that.
I wanted to share just one thing in terms of stages of food addiction, a message, and then let's take it back to how do we reverse it. There's a one-liner in your book that drives it home. It's not the most pleasant message, but it's one to understand, that addiction is like an elevator ride that only goes down. But we can choose to get off on any floor. I'll say it again. Addiction is like an elevator ride that only goes down. And it is. It only gets worse. It doesn't get better all on its own. But we have a choice. It's up to us whether or not we want to get off. What I've experienced, and I've been doing this for about 6 years, whether it's my own experiences and now on the other end of helping others, and feel free to let me know if you've seen the same. Using that same elevator analogy, because I'm a big fan of them, is, yeah, we do have a choice. We can hit the button to get off on any floor. Okay, what I sometimes see is somebody hits a button, I want to get off on this floor, we refer to it as surrender, but they don't actually get off the elevator. That's the surrendering, I want change. You got to actually get off you got to get out of the elevator. And then what's important is we got to understand that the elevator doors, they stay open behind us now. They're always calling your name, our names, to come back. Hey, Tori, come on back. Remember those trips, the Rib Alley, the Rib Fest, the evening escapades with Ben and Jerry? Do you remember those nights? Why don't you come back in here? All right? That's what we got to understand. Those doors don't close. And if we do choose to get back on that elevator, we got to understand those elevator doors shut, and they shut tight, and that elevator starts to go down. Okay, well, one of my greatest fears is what I call unsurrendering, and that's going back in the elevator.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, I think I'm fearful of that because I've seen it happen to others.
Yeah. Can I say something to that? I just read a new study that was really intriguing. One of the things that I have observed, and I haven't been able to explain it, but this might begin to explain it, is I see this all the time with addiction, that when a person quits something, the first time is always the easiest. And the next time they try to quit, it's harder. And the next time even harder. And the chronic relapsers, I feel so sorry for them because they are suffering. And, you know, is it operant conditioning where you learned helplessness? I don't know. I learned to quit and then I know I'm going to start again. I don't know what it is. But there seems to be a phenomena that if you keep going on that elevator again, it's going to get harder until you eventually just say, I give up. I just read this new thing. I mean, I've explained it through this idea of learned helplessness in the past, but there's something about the brain that when you stop something, the memory of the dragon becomes enhanced. And if you go back, even if it was not satisfying, it's more. You want it even more than you did before, which is one of the things that the moderate people, the obesity clinics will say is don't go on a diet, because the more you go on a diet, you're going to gain it and gain back more. And you know, the yo-yoing will continue. And to some degree, there's a truth to that. So I do want to say to people, if you want to stop, really go for the first one, because that's the one that's going to work the best. It doesn't mean that it won't work later, but you're going to be struggling harder. Each time gets harder. Go for it now. But let me just one more thing.
Sure.
The thing about it is if the first time is easy, this is the thing that people will get sucked in by. They'll say it wasn't that hard, so I'll go to the wedding and I'll really blow it, and then I'll go back on my diet next week. But guess what? Next week is harder. Don't do it. Don't fall for that. It wasn't that hard the first time, because that was your grace. The next time will be a little harder, and if that wasn't that hard, go for it.
There's a couple one-liners that
It
we
gets
have.
harder.
A couple one-liners that we use around here. If you got to go all in on this, you do. You either go all in, and actually you're the guy that originally came up with that, Mr. Poker here. But you got to go all in. You got to go all in. And there was something else I wanted to. Yeah, I don't know how I could forget this one. My famous one-liner that carried me throughout this journey. Abstinence is easier than perfect moderation for those who have given into excess. Abstinence is easier than perfect moderation for those who've given. It really is easier to abstain than just to kind of have that little bit every once in a while. Final thing, and then we'll get into the Q&A in terms of, how do we get off the bus? How do we get off the elevator? You know what? It comes back to something we were talking about earlier. It's getting back to eating real food. Okay, if we just that's how you get off this bus. Goes back to Jerf. Just eat real food. If you do that, get away off processed food, and we sort of touched upon it earlier, and we didn't. But in terms of true hunger, when we're actually hungry, that's the body's way of saying, "Feed me nutrients." Not necessarily food. Give me nutrients. And when we're eating processed food, there's little or no nutrients, so we're not actually satiated. So that's why it's important, if you want to get off the food addiction bus, to go back, and this is something that I've stood for years. Those of you that have known me for a while, I've been preaching this message for a while, even more so now that I'm on my own, of eating real food. It's actually, there's no need for any complicated diet or anything. It's just going back to eating the way we used to eat.
Can I just say something to that? Yeah. So about the hunger piece, one thing a phrase that I've loved is hunger is the best chef. If you are actually hungry, a lot of food is delicious. So just on that alone. But anyway, when I suggest to people about abstinence, one of the things, responses I get is, "Are you kidding? Never, ever? I can never have this again. How will I live that way? Can I make?" And I'll feel deprived. Again, this is an addiction concept that I want to suggest to you. That feeling of, "Oh my God, how will I ever? I'll feel deprived all my life," is actually part of the addictive thinking. And in the same way that it takes 2 or 3 or 4 weeks to become dependent on something, once you stop the something totally, get off the elevator, it takes 2 or 3 or 4 weeks to go back. Now, this fire is still smoldering, but it's smoldering at a level where I can live with that. As long as I don't look at the Starbucks confectionery table, I'm good. But the desire that place of deprivation actually passes in 3 weeks, in 4 weeks. So this is not like a life of deprivation. This is a life of freedom once you get past that 3 weeks or 4 weeks.
And one of the things that it is hard to sometimes wrap our head around food addiction, but we get it with any other addiction. With alcohol, I mean, if you're aware of somebody that struggled with alcohol, nobody in their right mind would ever, I would like to think, ever try, would you like to have a drink? Right, with a cigarette or anything else.
Right. Let's celebrate by having a drink now. Yeah.
You would never do that. I mean, I would hope not. But with food, it's not understood. And I had a conversation with a couple people earlier today. I mean, unless you've truly experienced that creature or that dragon, you don't understand it. And I know sometimes for those around us, it's like, what do you mean you just can't have cake on your birthday or whatever? Although nowadays it seems like every day is a celebration, but that's another story. But I know there's a lot of you here today where you're supporting somebody, and again, unless you've experienced it, you don't get it. The analogy I used, I might get into a little trouble with this one, but I could spend my entire life understanding the menstrual cycle. And until I experience it in the spirit, I will never truly get it. Okay? So if that's the best analogy I can come up with. Okay. A Q&A. Let's. There we go. So other than sugar, what other triggers? What other triggers that can cause weight gain, such as caffeine or other things? Are there other triggers other than sugar?
Yeah, actually, sometimes, I mean, we start with sugar because that's the most obvious one. And then, of course, there's, in the processed food, offerings, there's flour, because flour is, according to the glycemic index, pretty much sugar. It's just it takes a little bit longer to digest, and then it becomes sugar. But there are other foods in the Renaissance program that we were working at. We were working with late stage, sort of mid to late stage food addicts, where people had progressed to a point where, because the worse it gets, the more larger the food basket is of things that you become addicted to. So we actually threw grains in there as well. So things like quinoa and rice and things that you would think are normally healthy and may well be for somebody, but not necessarily for an end-stage food addict. Things like coffee, saccharin or sweeteners, other things, fats themselves. It depends on the person, and what we try to do is, a perfect food addiction program would say, here's this general package of stuff that we know people are addicted to: sugar, flour, probably grains. For some people it's dairy, and I say some people it's caffeine. And then we try to tailor it down to that individual person, because it may be that a person is not addicted to something and another person is, or they have not become addicted to it yet.
So yeah, maybe just the other thing about on triggers, and I think that's what makes food addiction more challenging than others, is others tend to be more black and white. I mean, with alcohol, it's not, I can have wine but not beer. With food,
Right.
it's more challenging because what somebody's triggers are might not be somebody else's. And grains and wheats are probably the best example.
And thank you for mentioning the alcohol thing, because also in the food addiction program, we also, because it was an addiction program, we also said no booze. And at some point you got to stop smoking cigarettes. I mean, I don't know if you guys know that Gary Tobes is in town, the guy who wrote the one of the sugar books. I can't remember what the new book is, but I just read this. Like, for every cigarette that a person smokes, there's at least half a teaspoon of sugar involved with that. I mean, like, holy cow, even cigarettes. So
even iodized salt, not iodized, iodized.
Salt.
Salt, yeah.
Salt, yeah, exactly.
Us dyslexics, once we have the wrong word in our head,
Yeah,
it's in our head.
so we would ask people, if you are not doing sugar and you're going, well, I still want this stuff and it's past 4 weeks, Vera, you promised me 4 weeks it would be over. I would say, what else are you doing that's still feeding it, that's invisible, that's still there and you don't even know you're doing it? You don't even know you're getting the sugar or something that you're addicted to. So when they say if you still have cravings after the 4 weeks, look to the food, look to the food, look to the food. What is it that's still driving what we call the phenomena of craving?
So, next question here. I'll do a bit of summarizing. For those of us who admit to having an addiction, to suffer from more than one, is there such a thing as an addictive personality?
Well, okay, so it's not an yes, except that we don't call it an addictive personality anymore. We're calling it addictive phenomena in the brain. It's a really good question, because what it illustrates is that it's not the substance, it's what's happening in the brain. And the cigarettes and the pot and the alcohol probably did it to me in the beginning, but it then became food. That was the acceptable thing that I could eat, even though I ballooned out to 100 pounds more. I could say I was an addictive personality. What I would prefer to say is that the addiction phenomena, that dopamine surge, got such to a point where I am no longer able to moderate my own dopamine, and so now I need a structure to contain that. And that's a phenomena that's happened in the brain. It's not a personality thing, because I think it can happen to anybody. May have been a specific thing that can happen genetically to some people, or for other reasons.
Topic of transfer addiction. You mentioned that addiction transfer. Is it feasible to deliberately transfer from food addiction to a positive behavior, for example, working out instead of overeating? So
yes. So there's kind of two bits to that. When we talk about recovery, when we talk about addiction treatment, stopping the substance is the first step. The big piece is, how do I stay stopped? And part of how to stay stopped is not just to learn about the tools to stay stopped, but to actually have something positive that you want to do instead of that. And you've developed a repetitive pattern of, I don't feel this way, I do this. So, yes, you want to fill that in with, I feel this way, so I do this. So yes, to some degree. Of course, you can over-exercise. Of course, you can do over-service. There are some people who do 8 12-step meetings, like I mean meetings, but like different fellowships, OA, CA, and whatever. There's a whole bunch of them, and you could really fill your day with just that. And so, when those things, what is addiction is when it's not so much the phenomenon in the brain. It's when it's become an impairment, so that I choose this over my job. I show up at 9 o'clock in the morning. I promised to be somewhere at a particular time, but I didn't because I was so full and throwing up, or so I was still eating, or I was so drunk, or whatever. I mean, something has impaired my ability to perform my normal functions. And if exercise and whatever might look healthy is doing that, then it's not good either. Because what we're trying to do is fill the negative behavior, this I feel this way, I do this, positive, but also I don't need to as much, because in 3 weeks that need is diminishing to a level that we actually, in the addiction jargon, we call serenity. Serenity is not I'm serene all the time. It's I have little ups and downs of normal life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have found, though, that, maybe between positive transfer addiction, something needs to occupy us. Some sort of, and I've seen it all the time where people really get engaged in their career, more active. They just find some new passions.
Exactly.
So maybe just something from a mental stimulant.
Yes, because people have said about addiction in general that these are spiritual seekers looking for their God. And if you wanted to, it's one of the reasons why I'm such a proponent of the 12-step program is that there's a real focus on spirituality. I can't possibly, because I'm used to that dragon, find another natural dragon, but I can mentally through some kind of spiritual process, which I personally, Vera, use through my service in this field. Somebody else might, we've all developed, those of us who are addicts, a voracious hunger, and but we can steer that hunger into a passion, and I think that we need to. So yes, it could be work, but again, you want to make sure that passion doesn't run the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we got a great science question here. So from a physiological point of view, our bodies run on glucose, which is a 6-carbon molecule that we use in a metabolic pathway. So the question is, when I read sugar on a food label, what type of sugar am I actually ingesting? Is it glucose, sucrose, fructose, and is this the type of sugar that is more addictive than glucose? I think what we're getting at here, the question is,
what's more addictive of the different sugars?
So even like, and I think sometimes the concern or a question I sometimes get is, everything is broken down, all starches are broken down into sugar. Is that an issue? By all means, if you want to, the person that asked this question, if you want to add to this after, by all means. But
yeah, I would have to say that I don't know the specifics of that, but I know that there's a certain amount of writing about fructose in comparison to sucrose. That there's certainly the way that's metabolized. It's metabolized in the same pathways as alcohol is, and partly that's why people who get fatty liver from eating are getting the same fatty liver of drinking. And my guess, but I don't know, is that might be happening in the brain as well. But what the specifics of sugar are, I don't know, and I don't know if we know that yet. We just know sugar. And it could be that magic mix of sucrose, fructose of an apple or fruit or whatever, like in the fibrous package that it's delivered and grown in, might be the perfect mix. And that when we start taking a processed, we start to take that balance out that our body has been tuned to, that we run into problems. Because with food addicts, one of the things that we'll also talk about is become recognizing of is that there are some fruits that a person can't eat because they have been engineered over time, because we create apples to be extra sweet and extra big, that some fruits are now too sweet even for a food addict. It's not to say that we can't eat fruits, but there are some that have been actually, if we were eating the apples of 300 years ago, we could probably eat them, but maybe we can't eat the ones of today.
Yeah, one of the things that I always encourage folks is when it comes to down to what foods to actually eat is you want to be consuming foods that have minimal processing, that have been less stepped on. So in terms of even the same, I mean, sugar is sugar.
Yeah, and you know what? I bet you, I don't have the answer to that.
Yeah.
And I don't know, and I don't have the answer. I read a lot about this stuff. And my guess is it's because we don't, in this field, have that answer yet. But I'll bet you the food engineers do.
Yeah.
And that they're working on it right now.
Yeah.
And that information is not accessible to the public.
Yeah. Actually, for the record, I've never shared this with you, but I actually have access to Howard Moskowitz, the same data that Michael Moss used. Howard Moskowitz is somewhat, I've reached out to him sometime. I have the entire, it's like 18 gazillion pages. Feel free to go through it. I've tried. He is one very scientific individual.
Okay.
We'll move on.
I don't know if I'm that much of a geek.
Yeah, it's he's hardcore. He's actually, his wife's Canadian. And I've invited him up a couple of times. But how can we deal with the concept of replacing one addiction with another? Can we use a tool to our advantage? So is there a tool?
That would be like saying, should I pick up smoking instead of eating?
Yeah.
Well, unless it's along the same
Can we
lines
use
as
a
the
tool
first
to?
question.
Yeah, can we use a tool basically not to help with transfer addiction?
I would not suggest a transfer addiction because what you're really trying to do is replace one dragon for another, and you can't. The dragon was never meant to be. It's like the apple that Eve gave Adam, whatever. We want to get back to the Garden of Eden. We want to get back to where we should be, which is not a dragon, but we want to get back to here. And if we keep reintroducing something big, we're going to keep wanting the voracious appetite. We want to get back to, it's fine just to go for a walk with my dog.
Well,
That's it.
Yeah,
I don't need to be blasted into the universe with 1,000 dogs.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say is maybe that maybe it's not necessarily a tool, but what I found particularly helpful is the awareness that it exists. Is because I mean, for the longest time, I never even thought about it. You can move from one, and chances are, if you do move from one addiction to another, you probably don't even know what's happening.
Right.
So that's why it's one of the reasons I talk about it is being aware that it could actually happen. I don't know how we are.
Like you can become a workaholic.
Actually, we are good for time. I was going to share this earlier, and I was concerned about time, but since we're talking about transfer addiction and awareness, I put this article aside.
Like you have to be worried about transfer addiction. A lot of people do shopping.
Yeah,
that's a big one.
I see that.
Big one. Buying.
So the way I'd answer that, I got a second one too. One is awareness, and this was an article from the New York Times, September 2014. It was off the drugs onto the cupcakes, and it was a story by a fellow by the name of Rodney Zimmers. He was 21 years old, 135 pounds, hooked on heroin and cocaine. He was 3 years sober, but in those 3 years, he went up to 250 pounds. And this, I remember reading this for the first time, as that's when I became aware of a transfer addiction. He said this: once off the drug, the brain craves uber rewards and other hyperpalatables.
That's the dragon.
Yeah, the mint, mint Milanos, the Oreo cookies, any sugar, and Apple's reward just didn't cut it.
Exactly.
So the other tool I'll say is motor support. There you go.
Yes. Yes.
There you go.
Okay. Can I say something about that?
Certainly.
How to live in recovery. So you want to right size the dragon. I'm never going to be. This is here's an example. I had a crystal meth guy say, you know what? I always did sex with crystal meth. Now when I have sex, nothing. Come on. I know what it could be like. And I say, you're never going to get that again. You're never going to get that. It's not natural. It's not possible. You just can't. You're going to have to right size the dragon, the desire. But the good news is, eventually, that does the body does tolerate itself back to normal. That's good. So that's the first piece. You want to learn how to do that. Then the second piece is, now what can I learn that is already available to me that I have been neglecting because I've been focused on this dragon that will actually sustain me? And so, dopamine is the dragon, but there are, to tell you the truth, if you want to have a good recovery program, we haven't talked about the neurochemicals, but there's serotonin and there's endorphins. Serotonin is actually the better neurochemical to rest in life. Serotonin is the neurochemical of social, of connection, of moda, of in 12-step programs, meetings, service, gratitude. In a religious program, people are not running off trying to get ecstasy all the time. They're running off doing service. They're running off going to church or whatever. They're running off doing volunteer work. That's serotonin that they're getting. And the thing about serotonin is it's a neurochemical that has a long half-life in the brain. Dopamine is new. It's only exciting for a minute. And then I don't need to hear that joke again. You just told me. But I don't mind being with you the whole day.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to have to talk to you the whole day, but I want to be with you the whole day. That's serotonin. So you want to actually have a program that's nicely serotonin-based. And that's the community.
Yep. Feel the power of a group.
Fill that in. And we really stress that in 12-step programs. And I've been telling Tony, focus on the support, because you have to have something to replace. Take something that is sustainable and long, with a little bit of fun here and there, and a little bit of the endorphins here and there, and you got a great recovery. That's a life. That's a serene life.
Obviously, I have a bias, so I'm not gonna. Thank you. All right, final questions. Actually, there's two, and it's the same question, so it works out. And it's basically about artificial sweeteners. The question's more about stevia, but. Your thoughts, your feelings on artificial sweeteners, whether it's a food addict, a sugar addict, etc. Artificial sweeteners.
Okay, so artificial sweeteners. I'll have to say there's two ways to answer that. There's the actual medical, scientific, is it safe piece, and I have to say to you that this new book that I'm reading with Gary Tobes, he's done some really interesting research where I would have said in the past. Watch sweeteners because they have, the cancer thing. And his line of, it's not so much which is better, but which is worse. Sugar is worse. It is. But, is this an actual better alternative, or is nothing a better alternative? I would have said the nothing, but reading this is actually showing me a lot of the negative hype about the artificial sweeteners was the sugar industry trying to trash it because it was a competitor. So I don't actually know now. I'm going to have to put a question mark there. Stevia, I'm feel a little more comfortable with, and then I would just go to the next piece, not the scientific piece, but the addiction piece. If you are a food addict in the first or second stage, it's probably not overwhelming enough, providing you're not pouring a bottle of it in, or to actually trigger a phenomena of craving. But if you reach past a particular point, it might be too much. And that would be an example of like the person who's an alcoholic who can't even be living in the house and seeing it all the time. The trigger is too strong. So it may become a trigger that's too strong, in which case, that one I would say, like in the Renaissance program, we initially said yes, sweeteners, and then we found people were triggered all over the place, and we said no sweeteners. So to be on the safe side, none, and then maybe introduce. And then the question is always, am I now wanting? And it's not that you want more of that. It's like suddenly that bread that you had no desire for, that had nothing to do with your stevia mix or whatever it was, but now you're interested in that bread. What happened? I was not looking at the bread, but that has triggered this, because it's all part of the same thing.
Yeah, I always encourage folks to err on the side of caution when it comes to sweeteners.
Yes.
My concern with anyone with a sweet tooth or a sugar addiction, the concern is it still tastes sweet. And the other thing, though,
it's the anticipation.
And the other thing, and I've been really intrigued in terms, and we're really in the early stages, but the microbiome. And I really can't help but feel my gut tells me, pardon the pun, that there is something to this whole microbiome thing and how it affects the gut.
I totally agree.
And the only other thing I'll add, and this just in terms of the food industry in general, is the whole trans fats history. I mean, keep in mind when trans fats was introduced in the 70s, I might have the timeline off, trans fats were introduced as a healthy alternative to butter. We now know even the most minuscule amount of trans fats are detrimental to our health.
Yep.
What concerned me was the data was there showing that this stuff was detrimental to our health in the 80s. The last I checked the calendar is 2017. It still hasn't been totally abolished. The food industry is taken away just because of the outcry. So whether it's artificial sweeteners or some of the other additives out there,
Yep.
I mean, my thing is, you know what? Wait to 20, 30 years for the data to come out, but you're not going to be able to get that time back. So just err on the side of caution.
Yep.
And jerf.
Yep.
That's it for
Fair enough.
Yeah, the more something's been stepped on, the more processed it is. I stay away with it, stay away from it, and I encourage those that I work with to do the same. We're running short on time here, but I'm going to let you wrap up, and then I will encourage everyone, first of all, before you wrap up, more information. There is a ton of it out there. If you want to learn more about food addiction, I would highly encourage you, for those that don't have the book, go out and get the book. It's available at the back. Vera will be more than happy to sign it. If you're looking for actual... Sure.
Quick question.
Yep.
Dr. Tarman, can you touch on that comment you made about cigarette smoking and sugar?
Well,
Yes.
that-
Well, just quickly, that there's actually
in this.
sugar in the cigarette, and so that a pack a day, you're probably doing probably like anywhere from 10 to 20 teaspoons of sugar, which is yeah, cigarettes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's no accident.
Yeah, no, it's no accident.
I know.
Absolutely no accident.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you notice why you would prefer to smoke a cigarette than smoke a rollie?
Mhm.
I don't know if you ever smoked rollies, but when I was in my teens, I smoked rollies because they were cheap. And I was like, nah, the TaylorMades are better, because they are. They got sugar in them. I didn't know that then, but that's what
Yeah.
it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty
Yep.
scary. Yeah.
Sure.
So the message of hope that I want to give here is, you may. My partner says to me all the time, Vera, the reason why people don't want to hear what you have to say is because they don't want to hear, I can never have my drug again. I can never have this again. Well, what I want to say here is, here's a message of hope. The obesity doctors are now, in 2016-17, saying, if you lost that weight, gained the weight, you're not going to lose it. You're not, so don't even try, because you're just going to, yo-yo and gain it back. So please don't even do that. But what I'm saying, what we are saying is, you can lose the weight, but you have to take this. It's not about losing the weight. It's about changing the mentality. And if you are an addict, you've got to take that serious. If you're not going to do that, then don't go to the trouble of trying to lose the weight. But if you do, the good news is that deprivation that you initially go, oh my God, how can I do that, will pass. And it'll actually pass very quickly. I have always been saying 3 or 4 weeks. In the food addiction program, which was a 3-week residential treatment program where people ate no sugar, no flours, no grains, yes, the first couple of days they were going crazy. But I was shocked by day 5, day 6, day 7, they were going, wow, it's like where I feel like I'm a different person. I mean, something drops, something changes, and that just continues and continues. And then there's all sorts of mental clarity and emotional clarity, and that feeling of I can't possibly. You don't want it anymore. So, message of hope here, that we're talking about freedom of obsession. It's a whole new way of living, and it's actually very positive. I wish I could sell it, but because then people might be more interested, because you put down money, you're more interested. But anyway, it's a message of hope that there is actually liberation out there, and freedom tastes great.
Yeah, food sobriety, food serenity.
Food sobriety.
And you do get out of this mental fog once you go through the withdrawal. And the withdrawal really is different for everyone.
And the weight stays off.
Yep. Well, it goes with changing your relationship with food.
Yeah.
I'll do a wrap-up in one quick second just to finish up on support. I talked about Vera's book. If you're looking for actual tangibles, what to eat, I have put together a cookbook. Everything in that cookbook is everything that I ate while I lost my weight. And if anyone is interested in looking for more support, the group support, we meet here every single Saturday morning. A whole whack of you that are here today are part of that group, and it's a pleasure to facilitate it every single Saturday. I'm going to wrap up with your slogan. I put it on one of the slides somewhere, and is the power is ours.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us today.
No, I can't go